here with Rebecca Hedgecock, and we've been talking a little bit about narcissism. Rebecca, can you tell us about narcissism and how it affects families?
I'll be glad to, and thank you for having me today.
No problem.
I've worked with families for a very long time, and quite often, particularly in the cases of divorce, separation, family conflict, there are personality characteristics and traits that just definitely get in the way of family reconnecting or separating in a wholesome, healthy way. Characteristics of narcissism include the inability to connect emotionally to other human beings. Quite often they're driven by their own needs for satisfaction, direction, goals. So they really can't connect in a wholehearted, wholesome way because they are driven to fulfill their own needs. And so in the case of families, particularly if one or the other, or both sometimes parents have those tendencies, who's left in the middle to try to figure all this out, and it's the children. Because each parent is so caught up in that need to have it their way, it's not a very healthy place for children to reside. So working with those families is very difficult.
So is there an effect on the other spouse as well as the children?
Almost certainly. I mean, it creates something called emotional blackmail is I guess a behavior pattern that sometimes narcissists will engage in to manipulate the other partner and also manipulate the children as well, because they use three basic emotions: fear, obligation, and guilt to get what they want in their way. So it makes you feel like fog, F-O-G, that you're walking around in this arena of fog, and you're not clear about where you stand in that relationship. So as foggy as they can make it be around you, then they have a higher chance of manipulating and getting what they want. So being able to catch those red flags when they're happening and not get sucked in to that manipulative pattern is better for everybody.
So I know you said they tend to manipulate any possible treatment options. Are there any treatment options for these people?
For narcissism?
Right.
Wow. It's really a restructuring of a whole belief system, I think, at the root of it. Has there been major research studies that says, oh, definitively this can help? DBT has been, but that's with borderline personalities, but some with narcissists as well. Cognitive behavioral strategies help it, but all that being said, the client has to be willing to receive the treatment. And if you think that you're right 100% of the time, then are you going to admit that you have a problem? So typically they don't. So it is difficult. But it plays into parental alienation, which is something very prevalent, I think, in our society in regard to parents having separated, divorced, because if there's still a lot of residual anger and conflict, they're going to try to get that child to side with them against the other parent. And that's detrimental to a child. It's not very healthy at all.
So does the other spouse have any option other than just leaving the relationship?
Mm-hmm. A relationship with the other partner?
Right.
Oh, wow. I wouldn't recommend that they stay if the other parent is not willing to process and to start changing, because they can't change. We cannot change anyone. They have to want to change. So that means being open and willing to listen, to truly listen to things that are troubling in their relationships with other people. But narcissists can't connect emotionally. So getting them to do that, I mean, I think, one of the only options is to really think about, I have to live for me and my child. What can I do to have a wholesome life, and how do I work with this person knowing that they have those characteristics but still stay healthy? Clear boundaries, really getting the child into counseling too to talk about how he or she is feeling about this, because they still love their parent. Even though the parent may be a narcissist, they still love kids love their parents no matter what. And they do not like feeling like they have to be, divided or conquered in that.
So, Rebecca, how often do you see parental alienation in your practice?
More than I like to see it. And I think it comes from the intense anger and hurt and pain that one or other of the parents are feeling. Because, say for instance, either the mother or the father had an affair and they've already stepped outside of that commitment. Marriage is an emotional commitment and also a legal contract of an emotional commitment. And so when one partner sabotages that and steps outside, then the one that is left is, burdened with the pain and the sorrow and the, oh no, what's going to happen to me? So if that's not dealt with in counseling, if that's not, essentially dealt with in a therapeutic setting where they can feel validated, but then work through that anger, then of course they're going to sabotage any connection that the other parent may try to have with that child. They will talk badly about the other parent, or they'll say, your dad really doesn't want to spend time with you. He's just doing that because he doesn't want to pay child support, or just really hurtful statements to demean the other parent. And so that will alienate the child, because who's the child going to listen to? The one that he or she is with the most, and hear those kind of destructive comments about the other parent. And then the one that, does say, well, I want my visitation, I want to have a relationship with my child. How do I work through this? How do I get through to the other parent that I do love it? It doesn't mean that I've fallen out of love with my child. It means I've fallen out of love with you. But let's put the child first. So the parent that's left with all the pain and the sorrow definitely needs counseling to work through all of that energy, and a lot of it negative energy, so that they can put the child first. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, but what about the child? I mean, what do we do for them in these cases?
I do a lot of play therapy with younger children, but adolescents, we talk about what it is that they are feeling themselves. The feeling split, the feeling, disconnected. I mean, they're very honest and open when I've developed rapport and trust with them, of course, which
Right.
doesn't happen immediately. But they start talking about what it's like to be in a divorced family, because for them, that's throwing the world up. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. They had this beautiful picture of what family was, and the parents have thrown it up in the air and it crashes on the floor. And there's all this multitude of pieces that, what do they do with that? How do they reconstruct? And a lot of it's out of their hands. It's in the parents' hands. And how is this going to look? We're going to reconstruct family, but it has to look different. But if it can be done in a sense of, peaceful, collaboration and consideration,
Right.
then that's the best for everyone, not just the children.
Do you ever have cases where children are living with a narcissistic parent out of that fear, obligation, and guilt, and there's almost a sense of relief in the child whenever the parents do split up?
Oh, absolutely, particularly with the adolescents and the older children, because cognitively they have a greater reasoning ability, so they pick up on things that have been going on between mom and dad. A lot of time, in defense of their parent, the one that maybe does not have the narcissistic characteristics, in defense of, particularly if domestic violence has been a part of that. So it's the older child that has more reasoning capability and will say, oh, I'm just so glad that dad's left, or I'm so glad that mom has left, because it's more peaceful, it's less chaotic. I feel, I guess, somehow liberated from all the toxicity that was occurring in the family unit. But then if the narcissistic parent is very suave, they are so good at manipulating, then even the child who is older and has reasoning capability can be kind of sucked into that way of thinking too, and may even side with the narcissistic parent instead of thinking, okay, I need to get away from this. So every situation is uniquely different. So I can't generalize and say all narcissists, this is what, children feel when they finally get away. But there's definitely, I think, a liberation in, for them to know that some change is happening, even though change is very difficult. So yeah, but little kids have much more difficulty, I think, with that.
Right, and you said the narcissistic parents, if they're suave, they can kind of manipulate the child into siding with them.
Mm-hmm.
What sorts of things might they do once separation does take place?
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, once again, they could use a tactic of saying negative things about the other parent, or you know that your mom is wrong. When she was saying that I was having that affair, I would never do that to you. I would never hurt you or your mom. When in fact those things were actually happening. So they essentially lie about their behavior. They'll say it in gentle, kind ways. Convince the child that they love them so much, they really care about their feelings, when in fact they really don't. It's about getting what they want. And if the narcissistic parent does not want to pay child support, does not want to give the other parent anything, then of course they're going to try to get the child to come to their side, and they will say and do whatever they need to. Children are innocent. They'll believe what the two people who are the most important in their lives tell them. They are, because they love. They don't know any different. So it's important for, I think, the parents, the parent who is not narcissistic, to be able to say, okay, wait a minute, these are the red flags. This is what's been going on. But they can only do that when they begin to see to see and be able to own those red flags. Like, wow, I've been told this for so long, and there's another term, gaslighting, where a narcissist will try to convince the other partner that they're crazy. It's like, what, that I didn't say that. You seriously, you believe that I would do that, or I saw you out with your girlfriends, or I know, it's making up all kinds of things to make the other partner feel like they've just totally lost it. It's like, wow, they start second guessing themselves. When does a mom or dad get to the point where they say, okay, this is enough of this, I can't do this anymore? They definitely have to go talk to someone to say, how do I label this? What is this? I know I'm not comfortable. I know I'm not happy. I know that it puts my child at danger, but I don't really know what's going on. There's that fog, that fear, obligation, and guilt that's been used in that toxic relationship. And so they don't even know initially what it is. Maybe they haven't even really heard narcissistic personality. Maybe they've heard it, just in passing conversation, but what is that really? So it's important for them, as they take that step toward separation, divorce, recreating a family unit, first and foremost is go talk to somebody and help them to define what their relationship has been, and also to redefine where they want to go in the future as they exit.
You mentioned some red flags, but I would imagine being in that situation would be kind of tough to pick up on those. What sort of red flags should we be looking for?
Right. I think hidden agendas, a parent or a spouse of someone who is doing that, is really attend to how they feel when their partner tries to deny that they have that feeling. It's like, oh, no, you don't feel that way. I wasn't trying to do that. Oh, I didn't say it that way. It's like, no, wait a minute. Yes, I'm pretty sure, because I have really good auditory, I can hear things. I am an intelligent person. I heard these things, and this is how I processed it. Be able to own, you know what, I'm not crazy. No, this is legitimately what I heard. So being able to pick up that person is trying to convince them of something that they know is true, that's a red flag. The lies, the deceit, the pretending, the let's see, what are some other things? I think the biggest piece is really attending to their own truth of what it is that they're feeling and they're thinking, and they know deep down it does not feel comfortable. This is not a healthy relationship that we end up arguing, and we can't sit and have a wholehearted conversation without there being accusations. So there's a lot of accusations too, because I may, as that spouse, say, well, wait a minute, this bothers me, or I've heard this, or I've seen this, and the other person just automatically jumps on me and says, well, you know that we can't even have a decent conversation because you're always blaming me, you're always accusing me. So that's projection. She would be projecting onto the other person what it is that they've been doing. So being able to pick up on that. I also, in my practice, encourage people to read. I think reading words are powerful. And so the terms fear, obligation, and guilt actually came from a book entitled Emotional Blackmail by Susan Forward. And she proposed that in those toxic relationships, it is like walking around in fog. And the acronym FOG, that stood for the fear, obligation, and guilt. So I encourage people to read. So I share different books for them to read. If they're wanting to work on the relationship, I encourage them to read a book, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. I have a whole list of books if they're willing to. But some people aren't, not readers, but they're auditory, so they will listen. So I find out how they can get those books auditory, and then it's food for discussion in the sessions. Let's talk about that. What is a red flag? And then help them to notice and attend to those and even define for themselves what those are. So, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. Okay, Rebecca, we know each other, but can you kind of introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Rebecca Hedgecock. I have been a licensed professional counselor for over 27 years. I've worked with multitudes of family, circumstance, condition. I love what I do. I just recently also got a second master's degree in mediation and dealing with conflict and understanding conflict more because I was working a lot with families that were going through divorce. And I felt like that conflict is not always a bad thing, but I needed to, for myself personally, be able to communicate that to my clients so that they can have a healthier perspective on conflict and realize that they can grow from the conflict. It doesn't have to be destructive, but it then can be used to be constructive. So I do a lot of marriage and family counseling. I work a lot with children and adolescents. I do play therapy with younger children. As I'm aging, I'm not doing as much work with the little bitty kids as I used to, but I most certainly believe in working with parents as they're trying to set up a very constructive discipline plan, particularly when families separate. Mom and dads tend to have very different rules and regulations and consequences, and it's typically the parent who doesn't have the child the larger percent of the time is very lenient, and then so when the child goes back to the parent who has the majority of the time, they think, oh, I can go back and do whatever I want because dad. And so little kids can be manipulators too, to try to get their way. But so I help parents to understand that consistency and structure across, the boundaries that they have put between them is so important. That they're still a family. The construct of the family is changing though, and they have to put their children first. And that's very difficult for parents sometimes, because sometimes they struggle with emotional maturity because they're hurting. And maybe they've had difficulty with issues of depression and anxiety in the past, so that's going to feed into that. But love being in my practice here in Southport, and I enjoy working with families and children.
So Rebecca, what makes you different than other counselors?
I think what makes me different from other counselors is the fact that I practice what I teach, and that's being mindfully present. And, on my website, I talk about mindful inquiry, which means when I connect with someone, I try to be wholeheartedly, and that's a big word for me, wholehearted. I am present, I am open, I am compassionate, I leave judgment at the door. Even when I would talk to a narcissistic or, someone who has those characteristics, I still try to see that within them is still something, that potential for change is there. I try to draw that out so that they can see the possibility and how the possibility may be better than what they're doing, the strategies that they're using. But I honor and I respect, and that doesn't mean to say that I don't think other counselors do that. I think they honor, respect. We cannot be in this field and not care about people. I think that's a really important thing. And so I teach mindful practices, meditation. Big believer in evaluating historical beliefs and ideas that have added to the formula of who we are today, but then that belief system, that perspective, those ideals may need to be different today, because if it's not working, then maybe that needs to be examined. So that mindful inquiry is asking the questions like, how does that help you to believe that? How does that help you to a narcissist? How does that help you to believe that you're always right? And how does it impact the people that are in your life? So it's about, asking questions, inquiring, really, really listening, and then using what I hear to help them to begin to formulate a different point of view that may be more constructive in their lives and in the relationships.
I know you've talked about some of your treatment methods. Are there any other methods that you use, and how do you decide which method to use for each client?
Mm-hmm. It's so individual as far as picking methods that I would use, but bibliotherapy, cognitive behavioral, the DBT, some of those strategies, which has a lot to do with rethinking old patterns and beliefs. Emotion regulation, really thinking about, okay, how often do I make decisions based on how I'm feeling as opposed to what is really happening? Because we can get so caught up in the emotion that we do not think clearly, and it will really impede any progress in a relationship. I think movies, particular movies, encouraging people to watch a movie that may pertain to a particular theme or situation, and then that's food for discussion. I encourage people to go exercise, to create a plan of good self-care, exercise, maybe yoga, walking, meditation. It's really like developing a script for each individual client, because some of them may have disabilities and they're not able to do some of the more physical stuff, but there's always modification and the creation of new tools to have the life that they want to. But it's a lot of thinking outside the box. That's the whole point. You want to get out of the historical box and not really box yourself into anything, but being willing and open to continue to grow.
Can children display these narcissistic personality traits?
Little kids can be just as manipulative. Narcissistic, no, I would never diagnose a child narcissist. But we all know kids want what they want when they want it. So they can be very manipulative. And that's where parents have to really work, I think, on counseling on their own shame and guilt that they may feel because of the breakup of the family. Because little kids will do that, and then because of our own shame and guilt at having broke up the family, then we overcompensate, or we allow them to do things because we've really hurt them, or look what their dad has done to them. or I have done to them. We can't do that. They need structure, rules, consistency, but all with compassion and patience.
So how do narcissistic personality traits in parents affect children in the long run if untreated?
Well, I think because of that pattern of manipulation and control and communication is prevalent during the child's upbringing, well, they're observing, they're listening. They may carry some of those characteristics on in their own communication pattern with other siblings, other children, friendships, and a lot of it's by learned behavior. And as they become adults, if they haven't had an opportunity to see a different pattern of engagement and relationships, empathy, understanding, compassion, openness, then they're going to repeat some of the same characteristics in their own life as they age, which would interrupt friendships, relationships, and it would be painful process for them to continue for them, and they may lose relationships because of it if they try to use some of those strategies of manipulation, because they may engage with a partner who just absolutely can pick it up just like that and leave them. So the whole idea of abandonment, if they do not learn effective ways to communicate compassion and love and connectedness, learn how to problem solve. So yeah, in the long run, it could really disrupt them in the future relationships. It also could promote some anxiety, depression, because of course it may not work in our relationships. So then they, depend a lot on maybe what other people think about them in defining self. So if they have repeated feelings of abandonment and unwillingness to recognize them and incorporate them and include them in life and relationships, then of course it's going to hurt them in the long run. But that could be said about any condition in the family that could be exhibited by either one of the parents. The kids pick up traits, they pick up characteristics, and use those to try to make sense out of their world and to be safe and feel secure. And it's not always in healthy ways that they attempt that.
So Rebecca, how do people contact you?
I have actually a remote office management system that they can contact at 910-987-6491. My practice is Tools for Life. I do have a web page. It's toolsforlifellc.com. I have a bio there, so I really encourage people, before they schedule with me, check out my web page. Read about my philosophy of life and what I have to offer, before you make that decision. Because it's so important to, beforehand, I think, know a little bit about a therapist before you decide to go spend your money and talking to somebody, because it is an investment. It is a personal investment. So my practice is here in Southport at 103 East 8th Street. Very convenient to my home. I have it in Southport because this is where I live, actually. I live 0.7 of a mile away. I drive my golf cart to work, so if you become a client and you see a little blue golf cart out front of my office, you'll know that Becky's here. Becky's in her office. And I have been doing this for a very long time. I've been privileged to work in the field of psychology for over 27 years, not only in private practice, but in larger mental health centers over the years. I did case management through, people accuse me of going on to the dark side, but it's because I did utilization reviews for insurance companies in regard to behavioral health. Did that for a while. I've taught at Cape Fear Community College. I've also taught at the University of Houston in Victoria and Western Piedmont Community College in the foothills. So I've really been blessed to be able to do a lot of different things in the field of psychology, and I enjoy it. And I would recommend young people to think about doing the same thing. In my private practice, I accept a wide range of insurance, private pay. I teach classes and I lead groups.
Have you experienced someone with narcissistic traits in your life? If so, let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share to maybe help someone who's going through this in their life.